Hello, good evening, and welcome to another great episode, guys. We are here for you today. You know what today is? Today is Monday, and we are kick-starting off the week with your Authentic Leadership 101. And we're bringing it today, part two of what does it mean to be authentic leader. Man, we had a great discussion on last week. We talked about a little bit of the vulnerability. We had the conversations. We was talking about psychological safety, but we're just going to take it up a notch. And of course, I don't do this by myself. I got my wonderful co-hosts to help me out with this today as we continue on our conversation. The lovely Tracy Borreson. What's going on, Tracy?
Ooh, happy Monday, everybody.
Happy Monday. It is a happy Monday. Was it a happy Monday for you, or you just saying happy Monday for the network?
No, it's pretty good.
That's
It's election day in Canada.
Oh, okay.
Today. Federal election
Okay.
today. So we went out and did our civic duty of voting, and it was so cute. My husband and I, we both work from home, so we just went together and we picked a random mid-morning because we were like, okay, there'll be like a rush in the morning because people will go before they go to work, and then there'll probably be a rush at lunchtime. So we'll just do something in between. And I think we ended up going at about 10 o'clock, and it was awesome. We walked right in, voted, and we took my son, he's 3, and showed him the process of voting, and everyone was like, he just is really cute. He's very talkative. He wants to talk to everybody. And everybody's
Politician.
like,
He's working on his politician
I know,
skills.
right? Although lately I feel like he's going to be more like a director. He wants to direct everything.
Oh, well, that's even cool. That's cool. I would like to hang out with him then once he get his directing chops up there. I always want to hang out with the Hollywood
next James
guys.
Cameron. Yeah.
Yes. I want to hang out with the Hollywood chops thing.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, so it's a good Monday. It's sunny outside. It's legit fall here now. So it's cold in the morning. Like it was close to it was mid 30s this morning Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
So it's
That's
chilly.
that's a little chilly. I don't
Yeah,
want
we
it that
wore
cold.
gloves so we could walk to the school
Wow.
where the voting station set up. Here to talk about what it looks like to be an authentic leader. So
Absolutely.
if you guys didn't get a chance to take a look at the last episode, Shawn mentioned some of the things that we talked about. Vulnerability, we talked about a lot. I'm sure it'll come up again in today's episode because it really is a crucial piece to being an authentic leader. We talked about creating spaces for conversations, having those spaces that are safe to do so. So we talked about psychological safety and what it means for somebody to feel safe and be able to have those conversations. And these are just we're really setting the stage, you guys, for this series with last week's conversation and today's conversation, because unless we know what type of things we want to do as an authentic leader, we can't start doing them. And as much as this episode is about Tracy and Shawn hanging out and having conversations about things that we're passionate about, it's about giving you guys access to be able to do things, to go out and be a more authentic leader. So one of the best ways for you guys to get the most out of these sessions is to participate.
Yes.
So if you guys are watching live, please say hello in the comments, and please share your perspective, share your questions, share your thoughts. If you think that we're out to lunch with something that we're saying, this is a conversation. This is one of those places where we get to practice creating a safe space for conversation. And conversation doesn't mean that we agree 100% of the time. It's not the point. The point is to have a conversation. So we really, really want to encourage you guys to be part of the conversation. It will make it more real for you. It'll give you access to ways that you can do things. And it's just the best first step for you if becoming an authentic leader is on your to-do list.
Absolutely. And that is definitely your call to action today. And I missed that part on the intro. I want you guys to drop by, not only just drop by, but drop your comments in. Tell us where you're tuning in from. That's an important thing to me because I like to know the dynamic of the geographic area where we got people tuning in from, and jump in the conversation. I know you guys got great questions. I know you guys got a lot of things going on in your places of work, and this is the place to discuss it. Don't worry, we're not telling anybody. Drop it in. let us know. Let us discuss it. Roundabout questions. You know how we do. So let's get it on and let's get it started because we're talking about topics that's really affecting a lot of us now and will so far in the future as far as going forth. And if we want to be these dynamic people, authentic leaders, showing the vulnerability and authenticity it takes to really lead. We're going to be going over a lot of those things, and we can only go the directions for which we get the traffic people to come. Traffic cops, they come this way. Okay, you guys are the traffic cops. So we got a lot of things to cover, but we want to cover and pinpoint and go in a sharp laser focus to the things that's bothering you. Wow, you, the network, you the ones that's watching.
Yes.
All right.
So we have Jay joining us from Calgary, my hometown, my friend Jay. It's good to see you, Jay.
Jay.
And I know Jay has tons of experience in leadership, so I'm sure he's going to have tons of good stuff to share with us today.
Great, Jay. Well. Love to hear it. Love to hear it.
Yeah. And so today, as I mentioned, Shawn mentioned, last week we talked about 3 of what I'm sure there will be more pillars as we go, but as we outlined from the beginning, our 5 pillars. So we have 2 more that we're going to talk about today. And the first one is my most favorite, personal branding. So we're going to be talking about personal branding today and what personal branding can do in terms of creating space for yourself to be that authentic leader that you want to be. So if you're okay with it, Shawn, I'm going to kick it off because I have all the things to say about this. So personal branding, first of all, a lot of people think it's only for people who are entrepreneurs. So let's just put that to bed and say that's not a thing. My definition of personal branding is the feeling that you leave other people with when you leave the room. And the reason I love that is that everybody has one. I think everybody knows that, right? Like when we experience other humans, they leave something. They leave something with us. They leave a feeling. They leave an impression. You leave something, right? And so that's what your personal brand. That's your personal brand. And as a leader, there's an opportunity for us to use our personal brand by design to bring authenticity into the things that we do. Or, like, quite honestly, your personal brand is going to show up by default. You can't really stop it from doing that because it's who you really are. And in the leadership, it's actually really interesting. And this is a while back now, but on LinkedIn, I saw a poll asking people if they felt like they had been able to show up authentically as a leader in their work environment. And as soon as I read it, I was like, nope. Right? Like I said, no. And I was actually surprised because I think 67% of people said yes. And so that if that is in fact the case, or maybe it's just like that person's network, which is also kind of can skew poll results. But it was so interesting because my immediate response was no. And that's because there were ways that I was expected to show up at work as a leader that were not the way I would do it. So it was a way that was dictated by the CEO, and this is how people were supposed to show up as leaders on behalf of the organization. And it's not that that was necessarily bad, but it was that it wasn't aligned with me. It wasn't what I would do. There were things that we promoted in social media that I wouldn't have said. There was a lot of confusion in our marketing messaging. There was a lot of freedom for people to manage their departments in their own way, which makes the overall corporate experience very inconsistent, right? So one group of people might really love working there. One group of people really hates working there. And it's not done by design. It's just done willy-nilly. And when you look at the concept of being an authentic leader, we don't want to just show up as willy-nilly. We just don't want to fly by the seat of our pants all the time. We want to show up and create these spaces where we're there to accomplish a specific thing. We're there to inspire people. We're there to give those people space to be themselves and honor their values in the work environment. And it's so, so important for leaders to embrace their personal brand, because otherwise there's zero opportunity for your employees to be able to do that. You can tell, Shawn, I'm already like all up in this.
You got it. You got it. You got it. I know this is right up your alley, so this is a great opportunity to shine.
And if you guys I really would love to answer any questions that you guys have too about the concept of personal branding, because one of the things that I will say, especially when it's tied to authentic leadership, it would be really nice if we could just define our personal brand today and it would never change. We can just make a logo and our logo can stay the same for 8 years, 10 years. Even really big companies like Walmart, they change their logos and stuff too, right? None of these branding things are really consistent. And that's because the human experience is not consistent, right? So when you look at authenticity is about being true to you. What being true to you looks like over time is different. And so as I grow and change as a leader, there's different ways that are authentic for me to show up. And the concept of an authentic leader is really about embracing that principle, in that you are going to change. Your staff is going to change. I always use this example because I think it's the most drastic example I have experienced in my personal brand, was when I went from being not a mother to a mother. And everything was different after that, right? There's a different version of Tracy. And for me to show up as the old version of Tracy is not authentic, because I'm not like that anymore. I don't have the same responses. I don't feel the same feelings, right? There's some things that I care much more about. There's some things that I care much less about. And quite honestly, it led to me leaving the corporate environment. And the only thing that was potentially keeping there was my people and me being able to give them spaces for them to have their own personal brands, but not at the risk of trading my personal brand. I didn't think that was a good trade. And it's actually been interesting because there's a lot of people who, I don't want to say I tried really hard. I tried really hard to create an environment that people wanted to be in, that supported their skills, their passions. And when I left, a lot of other people left because there was no one else doing that there anymore. And there's a lot of people who stayed, right? The people who stayed, who liked it the way other managers were doing it, the way the CEO was doing it, and that is fine. But this is also, again, the crux of authentic leadership, is when that is who you are and you show up and authentically lead that way, the people who want to be led that way can follow you. But if we show up in this willy-nilly concept of well, I don't really know how I want to show up. Maybe I should show up like Obama because he's got it. He's clearly got it all together. I should show up more like him. But maybe there's things that he does that you like and you can easily replicate, that feel honest and truthful for you. But it's not about being someone else. It's not me trying to replicate my CEO. It's authentic leadership is about me embracing me. And one of the other things that I always think of in that capacity is this, going back to pillar number 2, which was conversation, right? Having people be able to operate in that capacity, even if you were just going to say, we haven't got to the space yet where we are able to create these spaces for our employees or as a total corporate culture. Let's just say you have a management team of 5 people, right? Your small business. You have a management team of 5 people, and these 5 people can show up authentically. That gives you the opportunity to create constructive conflict. I know there's somebody listening who is all about the constructive conflict because that's what he always talks about. But you get the opportunity to have that because I can show up and say, this is how I see it, based on my experience, based on my knowledge, based on the things I care about, based on how I've interpreted the core values of the organization. And someone gets to show up and say like, oh, this is my interpretation. And we can be like, oh, that's an interesting interpretation. Now we can talk about it. And I think it's the path to better solutions, more creative solutions. And every time, yeah, Jay is saying, I wonder who that could be, because that's Jay. But it just is, it's the path to better problem solving, better answers. And by dampening that, you are dampening your access to more creative solutions, better problem solving, right? Which is confusing for me. So I'm going to take a break and have a drink. And let's hear Carl Shawn's perspective.
You were when you were talking about that, quite a few things came to mind. And again, I appreciate everybody that came by to checking in on us. When you talk about that personal brand, and a lot of times I don't think the dynamic of what people really understand that to mean. I know before I became, I had a personal attitude, or what I can say, or a personal way that I carried myself in my profession and doing my job and with my coworkers, and that interaction and that relationship. It was a dynamic that I just knew was what my understanding of professional was, and I just did that. But I don't think that, and I know that I didn't, just speaking for myself, and I'm sure others probably went across this. I didn't really realize the dynamic of what was a personal brand, because I didn't put that together with myself. And I think more so now, a lot of people think of them. I know more so in the workplace now than before the pandemic, because I get just so many people and clients and individuals that I've had conversations with. Now they want to take on a personal brand as part of them to develop even more, maybe their skills, maybe an avenue which they want to go down. How do you really come about that now that we are understanding this? Or maybe some don't quite understand. We are in this place and they say, okay, well, I'm a developer. I just say I'm a developer. I've been working 20 years for this company. Now I'm no longer there. But I got all of these skills. How do I make this a brand? And how do I even go about that? And how do I even identify? I know I'm rattling off these questions, right? How do I even identify myself as a brand, or even how do I market myself as a brand? So we could start at any one of those 50 questions I asked.
Okay, let's just start with the last question because it's top of mind. And this is, so first of all, your skills and expertise is one dimension of your personal brand. And I think that that's really important to remember, especially if you're entering the job market, right? If you're a leader and you're looking for, either you're moving up to a leadership position potentially, or you're trying to find another leadership position that will give you maybe more work-life balance, or whatever it is that you're looking for. Your job skills are actually like the tip of the iceberg. And it's a little, it's frustrating for me in the hiring market, because the challenge with personal brands is that every single one is unique. And when people are trying to hire, it's very difficult to compare apples to oranges, to bananas, to pomegranates, to pineapples, right? Like theoretically, that's what you're doing with candidates. And so in order to make it easier, not better, easier, we have just narrowed that down to hard job skills. So we've said that, like, okay, we want from you a resume. What does a resume have on it? All hard job skills. There's no soft skills really on most resumes, right? Yeah. A resume doesn't have anything to do with like building another human relationship with someone else. And when it comes to leadership, if you can't build relationships with other people, then how effective are you going to be as a leader? But it never, like, we don't put that on resumes, right? Like,
no, and it's essential. And I don't think a lot of them, when you talk about the leaders and you talk about those dynamics, I don't think that, and it is just personal experience. And I'm sure if anyone wants to share, some of their experiences in the comments, please do. I haven't ran into, maybe, I don't have to say I haven't. I'll backtrack on that. I've only ran into a few leaders.
Sorry, I have a 3-year-old under my desk.
That's okay. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. Hey, buddy, join in the conversation. What does it take to be an authentic leader, right? What does that look like?
Yeah.
But when you hey, that's the dynamic. That's the dynamic of being and working from home. I love it. We all natural. When you think about the authentic leader, and just in the cases of working with, maybe have maybe on one hand, well, I can really say, man, they were authentic leader, or and 9 times out of 10, that person that was in the leadership role, that wasn't the one that I was talking about. That was authentic leader. Maybe it was a coworker who like took charge of situations, or were like the dynamic. They call them like the alpha in sports. It was like the alpha individual that kind of took charge and kind of like made sure things were together. I've been on a lot of jobs in corporate where my leader was not that individual.
Right.
My leader was sort of like the mouse with the title. They knew, everybody knew where the office was, but they wasn't the one really running the department, like those kind of things. And when you have these leaders now, a lot of time, because I'm glad you mentioned that, because when I thought about personal branding, the first thing I thought about was what I was able to do, what qualifications I had. That's because when you think of that, you think like Apple or a Sprint or any of these companies. You think they have a product behind a brand. You never really look into the brand as being something cosmetic. You look at it and say, okay, well, if you talk about Apple, I know you're talking about a phone. So when I thought about brand and personal branding, I say, okay, I automatically went to what skill do I have?
Mhm.
Maybe I can brand that skill and that would be me. So did I come around thinking that the wrong way?
No, it is a dimension. It's just not the only dimension, right? And we make it the only dimension. And so I like that you brought up Apple, because they're actually I'm not an Apple user, but they're still the best example of this as far as I'm concerned. The reason why people buy Apple devices, most of that decision making is not because of the features of the phone.
Okay.
And so granted, Apple is generally ahead of the market on best cameras, blah, blah, blah. They're also the most expensive phones, right?
Yes.
And there's other reasons why people pay for that, right? Like, I'm not paying for an Apple phone just because it has the best camera. I'm like, you're paying double the amount of my Samsung phone for the best camera. That's not what you're buying. You're buying being part of something. You're buying being part of a community. You're buying the feeling of feeling innovative, right? There's a lot, like, innovation is a really big piece that's tied to the Apple brand. And it doesn't have anything to do with the product. Even I think about, if you guys think back, makes me feel old, but like when the first iPods came out.
Oh, yeah.
And all of the advertising were just about listening to music with your friends. That's all it was about, right? Like sharing playlists, listening to music, being with your friends. All of the commercials had groups of people listening to music, enjoying each other, right? Like it's a community of people. It's a feeling that you're buying. And that is also relevant in personal branding, right? And so this is what happens then when you get to interviews. You get to leave your mark on someone else. And the unfortunate thing about the hiring process most of the time is that there's so many good candidates that don't even get to the interview stage, because all people are looking at is a resume. And this is why being able to use platforms like LinkedIn, or the platform of your choice. I mean, we're all on LinkedIn right now, so LinkedIn's probably your platform of choice. But you can use another platform if you like it. But using those platforms gives you another spot, like a calling card that people can go to and learn more about you. They can learn more about what you care about. Because let's be honest, most of that stuff, anything that's on my profile, none of that is on a resume, right? Like, it's just not. Everything in my about section, not on a resume, right? This is your opportunity to shine, to show your personal brand. And I want to just tie this back into being a leader, because using your personal brand and really owning that, there is a confidence that comes with that as well.
Yeah.
And when you are looking at showing up as a leader, like we don't have a whole bunch of leaders, like true leaders. We have a whole bunch of managers running around doing it, but we don't have a
Supervisors,
bunch,
yeah.
true leaders that are showing up without confidence in themselves, right? And it's not just about confidence in their skills. I have confidence that I can write a really great landing page for you. But more so, I have the confidence in that the reason why I can do that is because I care more about your personal brand or your business brand than anybody else does, right? And really, you should care more about it, but we'll get there.
Yes.
It's that confidence is so critical in leadership because there are times where we get thrown into those situations. And again, I want to throw it back to our conversation last week on vulnerability. I'm going to show up with vulnerability. You got to have confidence in the other parts of me, right? Like I still have to be confident as a leader. I'm not like, I can't show up and be like, oh my God, what are we going to do? We don't know what to do. Right. Like that's not the point, but to come to your team and be like, okay, we're screwed. This is all broken and we need to fix it. Let's fix it. Ideas on the table, go. Right? That's not me showing up saying like, I'm the leader, I will solve the problem. But it's me showing up, having the confidence in myself that I can manage the situation, regardless of what it is. And that creates confidence in other people. And that's really critical as a leader.
Yeah. Excuse me, the authentic part about that when you made some dynamic points about that. I look at the personal branding and happen to be that strong leader, and melting all that together in a pot is like a really delicate kind of thing, because the vulnerability pieces, which I might not thrive and live on, but a there's also an air, if I could use that term, of confidence in that as well, showing yourself, showing up, being the authentic individual you are, and being able to lead through that. And I think a lot of people are not leading through those actions, and they're not leading through them because first and foremost they haven't picked up that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have this misunderstanding, which I always go back to the definition and how we understand words to be, often calls us how we act. And those two don't always align with what's real. And when I tell people that, I say, yeah, you can't say that's what the dictionary says it was, but I'm always arguing the term of the dictionary because I think it's applicable in most cases, not all, in most cases individually, because words tend to, especially the English language, it's like it's so ambiguous. It's like one, we can't even agree on one word meaning the same thing, let alone have that as how a person is. So when you have that misunderstanding about it, the vulnerability piece, and it really plays a part because that is the magnet that's really going to draw the individuals, and which is going to create the relationship. Like when you're doing that in personal branding and you're bringing that vulnerability piece in, how important is that to kind of melt that in, and how does that give you power as the individual when you're doing your personal branding part?
Well, and I think this is just an important point in general because, like any pillars, rarely you stand on just one.
Yes.
Right? And so it is important to melt the concepts together, and not just personal branding and vulnerability, but also the conversations, also the psychological safety, right? And we're also going to talk about values coming up in today's episode. So being able, actually, I'm really glad you asked this question because I think it plays highly into the like authentic leadership piece of this, is that every single one of you guys, myself, Shawn included, we have a unique way of blending those together. One of the things that I experience so often, even in with people who are doing like leadership training, is that here's the leadership profiles, pick which one you identify with the best, and then make decisions about how you're going to lead based on what people in that profile do. Now, if any of you guys have followed me for any extended period of time, you know my opinion on personality assessments. I am not for them. They're fine if they empower you, but they're someone else's representation of who you are. So you get to say if that's right or if it's not. And that's why I want to share the concept of this blend that you create. Like, there are these pillars, and every person has a unique blend of how those pillars come together to create your authentic leadership style. So let's just think about this for a minute. Every single person has a unique personal brand. True?
Right.
That means every single person has a different authentic leadership style. If we're all trying to be the same leader, that's only authentic for one person.
Not everybody.
Right? It's not. And so, like, think about all of the famous leaders that you know. Think about ones that you love. Think about ones that you hate, right? Like, even, I'll be honest, you guys, in personal branding, we can learn an equal amount from the people that we
Yes.
like are like, ugh. But a lot of those people, like, I will tell you guys, it, like, Donald Trump has like a super strong personal brand, and he cares none about what anybody else thinks about it. And he just does him. And I agree with almost nothing that he does, except he has a very strong
He has a
personal
very
brand.
strong brand, and it's undeniable. Who he is, what he brings, and what that says about him.
People
And
love
he's
him.
carried
People
that from,
hate him.
yeah, he's carried that from the door. He's actually an excellent example of that you will probably have two sides of the aisle on liking and disliking.
Mhm.
But one thing that we will have in common on either side of that aisle is that we definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, understand his brand, understand him as the brander, and understand exactly what he is as his branded leader. So
Yeah.
he doesn't leave any questions behind in that.
No. And like Hitler, Stalin,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
these other leaders,
Quite a few of them.
that you're just like, but wow, they just have their brand and they believe what they believe. And like, I am not promoting any of the things that those people promoted.
Yes.
I'm talking about it specifically from a personal branding perspective, right? Those guys, you think they cared? Like, do you think Hitler was like, I'm going to be like William the Conqueror? No, he wasn't. He was like, I'm going to be the one and only Hitler. And he still is to this day, right? Like, we still learn about him, and not for the best reason, not because he had a strong personal brand, but like, he had that. And the positive leaders did too, right? Like Gandhi, strong personal brand. Martin Luther King, strong personal brand, right? Like, these people were just like, they did them. They weren't trying to be anybody else. And the way that they led was unique to them. And you can't. Obama, same, right? Like, again, like I say, pick your favorite. I like Abraham Lincoln because I'm Canadian. I don't know why I like Abraham Lincoln so much, but I'm a Dale Carnegie fan, and Dale Carnegie always writes about Abraham Lincoln. So like, you pick the ones in your mind that stand out to you on a positive. You pick the ones in your mind that stand out to you on a negative. All of those people had a unique way that they authentically led people. And we all have that. And it takes courage to recognize that and step into it. It takes practice in figuring it out. There's sometimes, I used this example of street signs the other day, right? Like, when you're driving, you don't really know where you're going. So like, this is your journey of authentic leadership, right? Like, you kind of know where you're going, but not quite. And then you take this exit, and then you're like, nuts. That's not the right exit. And then you get back on the freeway, and then you keep going, right? Like, we're not all going to make the perfect decisions to be authentic all the time, right? Like, especially in a leadership capacity, we all have so much external knowledge of what makes a good leader, that influences who we are. And some of those things are just not us, right? Like, that is not us being authentic. It's us trying to be someone we think we should be in order to be the best leader. But that's not necessarily true. And it takes practice to peel away those things. It takes practice to figure out, what would I do, right? Because one of the things I know I experienced all the time in corporate was like, well, I wouldn't do that. I didn't ask myself what I would do, because I didn't have the capability of doing anything different. So I didn't get that far down the equation. But when you have the ability to do that, this is this ongoing practice. This is authenticity in all parts of your life, to be honest, you guys. This is this practice of what would I do? What would I do? What would I do in this scenario?
And most of the times you have to go against the narrative of what you know. Because I can't get away from it. It all comes back to that those leaders act as such and be as such because that is their understanding of what the leader is. And until someone comes along with the authenticity, I can't talk now, with the authenticity of being who they are, 9 times out of 10, that individual is probably ostracized instead of the people getting behind them and galvanize them, because we as a society has got this warped understanding of what a leader is. And a lot of times a leader is the one that shouts the most, or the one that that's, the alpha, the one that can get the groups together. But oftentimes those kind of characteristics we see amiss for the simple fact that the authentic leader that's somewhere in there never comes out, never shines, never takes control of things based upon who they are, don't lead people based upon what their strengths and capabilities are. They're leading behind a wall of, okay, this is my understanding of what a leader should be. How important is that to delve down into your own understanding of who you are first? Because I think we really have to, with all of the pillars, we have to really understand who we are before we can either put ourselves into being an authentic leader. And what does that really look like? What does it look like to us about us before we can even go out of that?
This is a great question, and we will get to the question in the comments as well.
Yes, I saw it.
This plays into pillar number 5, which is living your values. And a lot of times, so again, my background was I went to business school. I was in corporate, specifically in marketing, where my job is to just be the voice of other people. And no one ever told me I should know my values, have clarity on my values. I just felt pokes of things that poked against my values that I didn't want to do, but I didn't know they were doing that at the time. I used to call it poking at my soul. That just somehow didn't feel aligned. I don't ugh. And it's really something I wouldn't do. And so knowing yourself to that degree allows you to tap into these things. Because again, the challenging part about authenticity is there's not one way authenticity looks, right? We actually talked about this. So I run a messaging mastermind. We were talking about this morning. And one of the participants was like, I don't like writing storytelling posts, right? I just get stuck in the details and then I never post anything. And I was like, well, who told you had to write a storytelling post? Everybody on LinkedIn said storytelling is so important. You have to storytell. I'm like, I like storytelling on LinkedIn. I think it's fun. I do it because I think it's fun, right? That's me being authentic. But if you're going to show up and say I need to write storytelling posts, or I need to have beer Fridays because that's what this other leader at whatever company I worked at wanted to do, right? That's not, you're just copying what someone else did. And you're not doing it because you want to. You're doing it because you think you should, or you don't want to rock the boat, or 100 other reasons why you do it. And so when you're really familiar with your values, it helps you identify why you don't like those things, why the things you do that feel really authentic for you are feeling that way. It really is and personal branding and values really go hand in hand, right? Because the personal brand, it's about you honoring your values. And let's be honest, you guys, if we have to go to a working environment where we have to, let's just say, I always use this example, cares about people, right? I care about people. I want people to be heard. I want people to feel heard. I have been in a lot of working environments where I just watch people just get stomped on, steamrolled, and they're just trying to be heard and nobody's listening to them, right? It breaks my heart every single time. That's something that is just really critical for me, is people feeling heard. And when you have to go and work in an environment where people don't care about being heard, that hurts you. These are the reasons why people leave jobs, right? Because it's not something you believe in. And maybe you can get behind it for a certain amount of time, but I'll be honest, you guys, like even me, I left my vice presidency job in corporate because that was happening. There was too much happening that was against my core values. I couldn't stay there anymore. And again, like I don't believe in good values or bad values. I believe in your values and find a place that aligns with your values. And it's a key pillar to showing up as an authentic leader, because you can't be authentic if you're trying to be something else. You're going to be too busy trying to be something else. You don't have the opportunity to be authentic. And so it's just like, it really is a puzzling together of all of these things. And it's a journey. All of these, like, I keep using this example. It'd be really great if we could just like, be like, oh, light switch. All of a sudden I'm an authentic leader, right? Like I've heard the pillars. I've heard the pillars from Tracy and Carl. I believe in all of them. I can do those things. I can show up authentically. I can learn my personal brand. I can be vulnerable, right? Like I can create spaces for conversations. I can do that, right? You can. Yes, you can. You can start today. And
yes,
you're going to get to a point where you failed at it, right? Like, oh, I was in this meeting and I like could have done that, but I didn't do that. I just like, and then you start to see things like, oh, when I'm around this person, like maybe it's your boss, I'm around this person, like, I feel like I'm not allowed to be authentic. But when I'm just running my department over here, I can. And then I can create that space for my people.
That goes right into, actually a nice segue right into what Chantel is her LinkedIn, and I can see her name on my page, but I can't see it up there. Chantel, thank you for joining us all the way from New York City. She said in your first definition, you define a personal brand as the feeling we leave others with. Now, she got a good point there. We were talking about it, definitely talking about the consistency of, and a lot of times the consistency is if you're not really into who you are authentically, it alters. And I know you guys have been around and worked with ones where and it won't even necessarily have to be a boss. It'll be another coworker that you'll see, and it's not always cliquish. It can be just different things they'll do with one person that they won't do with another person, and they'll draw back in it. So she's just saying, with that interpretation of how you saying it's a feeling we should leave with others. How does one achieve that and maintain the consistency? Because you just really talked about how that can just change in the area of maybe it's your boss and you can't feel authentic because he haven't gave you that psychological space to do so. How do you kind of maintain that consistency in that as far as you continually to be authentically you?
And so the first thing, as I said, it is a process, right? So like, again, I don't get to turn on the light switch today and be like 100% consistency on my personal brand, right? Like it's not. But I talked about this on a podcast late last week in terms of when you think about it, when you do go back to that definition of a feeling, right? Like there are the feelings you create in other people almost always, unless you're trying really hard. So like minus acting, right? Like if you were a professional actor, then personal branding is actually a lot more complicated because your job is to be other people all the time. But assuming we are not a bunch of professional actors here, the feeling that you leave other people with is tied to your personal values. So again, I'll go back to this concept that like I truly believe in everybody not only being heard, but feeling heard. And that just because I heard you sound wise, doesn't mean you felt heard. If I'm trying to rush you through something, or if I'm double timing something, you might not feel heard. And so something that's important to me is for people to feel heard. Consistently, an experience I leave other people with is the experience of feeling heard. They have felt heard. And that's because it is part of who I am. It's a value that I have. And so when really what we're looking about on the personal branding front and really authentic leadership in general is that this the consistency exists by nature when you are being yourself. You don't have to try to achieve the consistency or maintain the consistency if you are living in accordance to your personal values. That is what will manifest. Now, the thing that breaks that consistency is when we try to be something else. I think that I'll use this example. We've got some women on here, and I'm sure we'll have some women watching after the fact. Women in business, not all of us anymore, but there are still a lot of women in business who think they have to show up really masculine, right? Like, and we have to lead like men, and we have to be tough, and we can't have emotions, we can't show empathy, we have to just like, we have to do this the masculine way. And every time, and then you know what? There are some women where that is their authentic brand. That is how they are.
They break it.
Right.
Yeah, that's how they break it.
Right. But like for me, if I was going to show up and just be like, no, I'm not going to listen to your input, just get it done. Mm-hmm. Like it wouldn't feel good for me. It wouldn't be consistent for my people because they know that that's not true. Right. Like, and I'm just not like one of the other things is I don't like to rush through things because I like to hear the perspectives. I think the perspectives is how we learn and grow. And so it's kind of just going back to basics. And again, that's what this series is about just reminding us that these things, I just want to throw it back to vulnerability for a second. I learn like all the things from my 3-year-old, you guys. So I will reference him like constantly in this series. But he doesn't have any problem being vulnerable right now. He's mad, he will tell you. If he is sad, he will cry. Right? Like if I feel sad, he'll come over and be like, it's okay, mommy. It's okay. Right? Like he is not trying to be anybody else except himself. And I use it as like a beacon every day for like, that's what it's like. And we can all learn a lot of things from toddlers because they just don't care. They don't care what you think they should be. And then we turn them into people who think about what other people think. That's for another episode. But it's just you being you. It's just you being you. It's just him being him, right? Like that's his authentic self. And again, there's been this break in the concept of being authentic and being a leader. Some of it because we define vulnerability as weakness, some because we think there's like this one profile of what a leader should be and we're all trying to be that, right? That's where the personal branding piece comes in. It's unique for every person, and that's what makes it good, right?
And
that's what makes it interesting.
That is, and what Chantel has said, I was thinking about that and I put this in. The benefits of the practice is what leads you to be consistent and being able to make that blueprint, because that's really what you are when you're being authentic and you're practicing that. You're putting out a blueprint for others to see, others to follow. And even if you're not in the status of leader, you still have a blueprint for someone to look at and say, oh, okay, that is how maybe that position's done, or the quality of what you're doing, the character in which you're doing it. All of these things amount to the authenticness, but that has to be a consistent thing across the board. And you practicing in that all the time will be the main pillar of helping you to achieve and maintain that consistency. And that's really what I want to tell Chanel in the essence of that. And that was a great question she asked, because a lot of times you do have people that they're like this with different ones at the job, and they're and more than likely you'll see it with the bosses. You'll hear them talk real talk with the coworkers because they're all on the same plane, and you will never hear those kind of things or those kind of judgments or those kind of remarks once management has come around or the upper hierarchy. But I think even without saying it, if you build that practice of being authentically you, it will get noticed, and people will start to identify you with how you are instead of you'll start getting some of those titles. Oh man, they wishy-washy. Oh no, you can't trust them. See, then you start getting those titles when you're not authentic, and that's really not what you want to be.
Yeah. And there's so much like, I know one of the things that I experienced a lot when I was a young employee from upper management is that they would just make sure they weren't around for certain things, right? Like they would come to the Christmas party for like the dinner and then they would leave for the dance and the party, right? Because they don't want to stop the employees from having fun. But that like
that's running away from it.
That's not a so it's hiding. It's hiding. It's not being authentic. And like it's just there's so much of that, right? Like it's really pervasive. And then as young people, we grow up having seen that. And then we get to the place where we're being a leader and we're like, oh, I need to like hide certain information from my people. Right. And again, like that's one of the things I don't believe in is hiding any part of us, because all of that beautiful multidimensionality is what helps us be the best leader we can be. And like I always think about it too from the perspective, I know like Carl and Shawn, we always use, you guys should just get used to us using sporting references. So like if I'm a basketball player, I'm never going to be Shaquille O'Neal. Right? Like I'm not going to be a center. I am not close to being tall enough. Let's just imagine I'm like 6'1" and could pass in the NBA as a point guard, right? Like I'm a guard. I'm not here to be a post, right? There are people who lead as a post and people who follow them need that leadership. And there's some people who lead as a guard and there's some people who need that leadership, right? And this is the benefit of being able to put all of these things together. And yes, remember your skills and expertise is one dimension. Just don't forget the rest of your dimensions. All of those values that you have as a human are so critical to how successful you can be at any given leadership position. And the more clarity you have on them, the more likely you are to use them. The more likely you are to be able to create spaces for conversation, the more likely you are to be able to be vulnerable when you need to be vulnerable, right? Like all of these things, I mean, at the end of the day, it really comes down to the human experience, right? Like it's just, we are humans. We're not computers. I'm not reporting to a computer, right? Like, yeah, a computer doesn't come out for drinks afterwards, but I know that a computer doesn't have, like I had a boss whose father passed away and came back to work 2 days later. And I was like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Right. Like that's, if my father passed away, you can bet I'll be pieced out for like a solid 2 weeks trying to process that. Right. Like, and maybe longer and probably on coming back to it a whole bunch of times. Right. Like that's what it's like to be a human. That's what it's like to be an authentic leader, to be like, you know what? I've built a team that can run the show without me because I need to grieve right now. Because humans do that. Humans grieve. Humans grieve not just death as well, right? We grieve losses in our careers. We grieve losses at home. We like got in a car accident and now our car is totaled and now I have to deal with a new car, right? Like there's things where we like picture parts of our future and then we don't achieve it and we grieve the loss, right? This is part of the human experience. Robots don't have that, right? So like, yeah, robot can go to work and just have no emotions and calculate things, which is fine for certain things, right? But the reason, especially in a leadership capacity, you guys, we are not robots. Robots aren't the leaders, right? And like, we'll just leave the matrix. I'm not going to deal with the matrix today. But like, we're leaders because we're humans, because we have empathy. I did a post the other day about how humans can make exceptions, right? Like, I'm sure you guys make exceptions to the rules all the time. I make exceptions to the rules all the time because I can decide what exception to the rule makes sense. A computer doesn't make exceptions to the rule. The computer follows the rules and just does its job. But this is where humans have the most ability to make an impact on people, on the environment of work, in families, in communities, and like, because like pick where you're a leader. You might just be a a leader in your home. That's still a leader, right?
Yeah.
Like it's us showing up and saying that we're not robots. This is part of being a human. And like, let's be real with each other. Because I don't know about you guys, but I'm tired of being fake.
It's never been a part of my DNA, but I tell you that some people, the dynamic of being that is scary to some people. That's why I talk a lot and deal a lot and talk to clients as such as far as the vulnerability piece into that, because if you're not embracing those things, which all really stem from uh, the dynamic of it really stems from fear, because you're fearful of acting certain ways with certain ones. And that fear, in essence, is building up the wall where you can't be vulnerable enough to know or to show or to build these relationships, to even improve your self acceptance. Like all of those things are really important. And if you're not careful, you tend to fall into this person of whom you have no idea who you are. And a lot of that is because you're just really living based upon what others have identified for you to be, not even who you are, but they've identified that for you to be. And when you're not in the authentic self of that, you can't have a consistency because you yourself are unaware when they come. A lot of those times, I mean, you've been doing it so long and you've gotten so good at it with certain ones that it has become a part of your character, though you don't want it to be. But people will start identifying you with that because you play the role so well. So when you're not authentic, it's really a hindrance to you as an individual, you too, as your overall growth. And that's in all leadership parts. It's not necessarily so much and so being the authentic leader at the job, but even in your home, even in you're dealing with your family, even when dealing with in relationships that you're supposed to be the leader of, you'll start taking a back seats to a lot of things, and you won't build those strong relationships. And that's why I always talk about the vulnerability piece of that, because you have to kind of like have that part of you that's okay in order for others to see, oh, they're okay with being like that. Okay, all right, then. All right, let's move on. Because a lot of times people don't understand. I used to say the same thing, and I used to think about the thing, the bully. And I had a guy, and this wasn't a big guy. I just was fearful of him because he was a couple of grades higher than I was, and I just say, well, you're gonna bring my lunch. You're gonna bring your lunch money to me every day at this period. And I'm like, oh man, I am. Like I wasn't afraid of him. He wasn't bigger than me, but he had just made this impression that kind of had me fearful. So I was like, instead of me wanting any drama, I bought him the lunch money. And then one day I didn't have it. I didn't get lunch money. And it just came up where it's like, okay, I'll have it. So what you gonna do? And at that point in time, I had just like, okay, now I stood in my authentic self, because I wasn't really the guy that was really taking it from anyway, because I didn't stand up into the person I am. And this is a lot of times, even when you go back to it, a lot of leaders that we have, they make us feel childlike. They bring upon those characteristics of, maybe you think you're dealing with mom and dad, you don't have the right to say certain things, and some of the characteristics of that. And if you're not standing up in who you are, you end up being the one that everybody bullies on. Everybody, just sends you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So set yourself care to elaborate on the following questions. Is there a filter that I use to make hard decisions?
So I always like to say to use your humanity filter to make hard decisions. And again, that's different for everybody, right? Everybody's filter is a little bit different. And there's not, when we get into the humanity piece, I think there are good filters and bad filters. But if you are looking at it from a place of what you care about, what you believe is right? And again, like, I think you guys are all good people. Some of you, I don't know all of you, but if you know Carl, Shawn, then I'm sure you're good people. We're here to help people, right? Like, we're here to be supportive. We're here to show compassion. When we show up doing those types of things and we focus on those things, it really helps make a lot of those decisions clearer, right? And it doesn't necessarily make them easier. Hard decisions are hard, right? Mm-hmm. Hard decisions are usually hard decisions because they're impacting either a lot of pieces, a lot of people, a lot of parts of your life, right? Like one of my sisters is making like career moves right now, and she's trying to figure out like, what is that? And when you can use this as a filter, use your personal brand, use your personal values, use a level of conversation, psychological safety, and vulnerability, right? Like, I'll be honest, I've made some hard decisions. I've needed to talk to people about them, right? Like there's some of these things we just can't do on our own in our head. And we talked about this, I think last week too, in terms of leaders assuming that they need to have all of the answers, right? Like, and again, you guys see how all these things are intertwined, right? Like, oh, then my ego takes over because I'm not willing to be vulnerable and blah, 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 blah. This is why they're all interconnected. And when you use who you are, your unique, authentic leadership qualities to help make decisions, the one thing you can guarantee is that the decision feels good to you. You can't guarantee that that decision is going to feel good to everybody because not everybody has your same personal brand. But again, just using that same example of me, if I believe that everybody deserves to be heard, I make decisions based on being able to make that possible. And at the end of the day, like, and I remember saying this when I was in corporate, like I don't know what anybody is going to come to me with in terms of solutions. One person might have the best solution. It might be a combination of us having a conversation, right? I don't know that. At the end of the day, I might just make a call based on the information that I have. But what you can guarantee is that I'm going to listen to you. And so at the end of the day, I know that I did what was important for me, and the decision feels easier. Doesn't mean you might not look back on it 6 months from now and be like, oh no, that was not the best decision. But like,
it comes with it comes with that when you talk about the hard decisions. And I'm of the I don't know, I never really looked at it. Well, I look at it as that because decisions are hard, and most of the time, or way that I've taken them, I haven't took decisions on personally, never. So therefore, they don't become hard to me. And when I say hard, not a hard choice to make, concerning that decision, not a hard choice. But what I'm saying is that it doesn't become a hard decision to me because it doesn't make it personal. And when I look at it, that I've factored in all of the mitigating circumstances that's surrounding this decision, and it's one that has to be made. Now you say to yourself, oh, Carl, you're just above this. No, I'm not above the fray. I've learned how to differentiate myself from being everything's personal. Everything's about Carl. Everything's about, and sometimes we take on that when we have these decisions to make, and we put so much emphasis on it that it really takes away from the decision you have to make, because you've made it about so much other things in order, I don't know, in order to make you feel better or in order to take something off of you. I don't really know the reason behind it, but it's just something that I just never did. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like it's specifically more important when you're making decisions that are for you, right? Like you're making a career decision.
Yeah.
If I was changing jobs and I'm making a career decision, then yes, using these things as a filter, critical, because otherwise I'll end up in a job where I'm working with a whole bunch of people who don't believe the same things I believe. And that's another thing that makes going to work really hard. But there are so many things that we overcomplicate. And like, I always think of this one because I see this on Facebook all the time. Oh my God, I need to choose between Acuity and Calendly to manage my online calendar. Yeah, just pick one. Just pick one. No one cares. No one cares which one you use. Right? Like it doesn't matter. And we do add a lot of things to that into decision making, but it doesn't hurt to use your personal brand, right? Like if I'm going to make a decision, and so I'll use this one again as an example, just because I was using this example the whole time. If I was going to make a decision and I was going to purposely take an action where I knew people were not going to be able to be listened to, like quite honestly, that's not something I would do. And there's lots of examples in my corporate life where I didn't do that, right? Like, okay, like someone wants to make a decision right now. Like I can't. Can you give me like 20 minutes? Like give me 20 minutes to run it by the team. And we also, like, we're not going to talk about this in detail today, and it's not really related to authentic leadership, but there's so many things that we make urgent that are not urgent, right? And when we start to get more practice in asking these types of questions, right? Like, what would I do? Is this urgent, right? I had a boss once who always said, like, we're working in marketing, right? He always said, we're not saving babies, which I always thought was interesting because my mom was actually a neonatal nurse and her job was to save babies. But we aren't saving babies in the marketing industry. Nothing is that urgent. And there's so many things in all of our businesses that are not that urgent, that we make urgent because we need to fill our time right now. But when we really get into this practice of being authentic, it also saves us tons of time down the line. That's for a future episode.
Yes, absolutely.
But it does.
We thank everybody came on. We had a great episode on tonight. We really touched on a lot of our pillars, and we went back and we revisited some of those pillars. We appreciate everybody that has came out. Chantel, thank you for Kathy. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you, Beth, James, all of you guys that stopped by. John J. enjoyed you as well. You guys come back next week where we will have another edition of Authentic Leadership 101. And remember, go back to those who are not live, those going to see this on the replay. Drop it down in there where you was tuning in from. Let us know. You had some wonderful questions on this evening. We love the discussion. We love to delve off into it even more, because this is really what it's all about, to try to answer some of these questions. If not answer these questions, let's get a deeper delve into it. I love changing perspectives. And when you talk to me as one that has read the dictionary from A to Z 2 or 3 times, I oftentimes tear it up when it comes to applying those words and definitions to people. That's what makes me who I am. I just don't see that perspective as Merriam-Webster or Oxford or whichever all of the other concordance dictionaries that are written. I don't see the words.
Fun fact, Shawn, I don't know if you saw, but I wrote a blog post last week about what authenticity means, because we're working on this. And did you know that there's like 4 definitions of authenticity before it even gets to like being true to your personal self?
That's why
people, you guys are interested,
people are so mixed up in the brain about, what the definition of it is. I tell people all the time, throw definitions out the window, live you.
You get to define, create your definition. That's what the end of my blog post says. But you guys can go read it for more details if you want.
Absolutely.
We will be here every Monday, except for long weekend Mondays, in which case we will be here on Tuesday at the same time. So put it in your calendar. Come check it out. If you guys have any questions about any of the things we discussed today, again, pop them in the comments, give us a tag. We'll come back and address them, or feel free to contact either of us on a direct message. We love direct messages and we love answering questions. So we would love to do that. Thank you guys so much for your participation today. You guys make this conversation what it is, and it wouldn't be the same without you. So thank you so much for doing that. And if you guys need support, we're here to support you in the development of your authentic leadership.
Yes, look up Tracy and look her up on LinkedIn, and look me up on LinkedIn, and we'll be back here on Monday. Thank you guys. Have a great rest of your week. Today is just the beginning. So take what you've learned today and actually go tell a coworker tomorrow you're going to be more authentic. You're going to be the more authentic leader that you know that you can be. So therefore, you can start with tomorrow.
Accountability.
With this great information that we've given you to start your week. You guys have a great night. Thank you for coming by. And as always, come back and see us at Authentic Leadership 101. Yeah, it might shut up. I'll turn it off.